Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Football is Fixable Alright podcast. With me, James, as usual, and there's no Ces this time, but it is Dan. I've got Dan here with me. Hi Dan, how are you?
Hello.
You alright?
Hello, yes. Yes, it's bittersweet today, light and shade, you know. On the one hand, I'm absolutely chuffed because Lord Harry Maguire saved the day.
Oh yeah, was it Europa League?
Yeah, and
last
I was
minute
on
winner.
such a buzzing high, and now I'm here and the intro and Ces isn't here and the low is quite palatable.
Although Ces will be back with us a bit later, but I forgot how close you guys really are.
Yeah,
I forgot you're like peas in a pod, aren't you two? So
yeah. I can't wait to have him back. Yeah.
I don't know. I was chatting to him earlier. I think he's getting grumpier anyway. I don't think we're going to miss him.
I won't have it. No, I'm not having.
Yeah, I think he's not much of a loss, to be honest.
Don't say anything against my Ces. No,
it's
not happening.
No, it is. You know, it's like that. What's that? Oh, my favourite film, Dark Knight. You know that old quote? What's it? You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. You know, you know that brilliant line from Dark Knight. Yeah, it's like Ces is becoming. Maybe he's going to become Souness. You know, as like arch nemesis Graham Souness, like really grumpy and sort of anti-football, and they're all softies. They all dive, and Paul Pogba.
Don't get him started on Paul Pogba. Yeah, no, I was thinking about that quote the other day actually. So if you either die a hero or see yourself long enough to become does that mean villains don't die?
No, but it says if you live long enough, you'll become the villain, right? So that's still sort of. There's an assumption there that villains will eventually still die.
So basically it's just you die a hero or you die a villain. It's just a really fancy way of saying...
Yeah, but depending on how long you live. But is that for everyone? That doesn't apply to everyone, does it? I mean, my nan's still a hero to me. She's... Yeah, you know? I think my lovely, sweet old nan, and I love seeing her, and she's such a lovely person. Is she...
I don't know, maybe... No, I don't know. Maybe
she's going to have the next few years or something. She's going to turn into a villain or something, or you know.
I think she's probably already become a villain a while ago. Just hides it really well.
How dare you?
I met your nana quite a while ago now, and I had my suspicions then. you know when you meet a person, you just get a sense they're hiding something. You know, she's got some skeletons in her closet.
Oh right. Know? Oh, okay. Oh, this is getting quite dark now. Yeah, right.
But yeah, on that actually, Maguire was like the anti-Dark Knight, isn't he? He's like...
Oh, because he was the villain first,
he was
wasn't
the villain, but he stayed long enough at United to become the hero.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's totally opposite to that, isn't he? So,
wow.
Yeah.
So maybe the quote isn't true, or unless he will still become a villain again later on. I mean, you don't know with United, do you?
Or Christopher Nolan now has an arch nemesis in Harry Maguire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Drama. Dun, dun, dun.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, so without Ces here, that's kind of quite a nice segue into our episode, isn't it, James? Because
today we're looking at player power, aren't we? And how much power one has, and now we have all the power.
And obviously, now our fearless leader is not with us. I feel like we have all the power going into this episode. So
what do you mean? Whoa. What do you mean, leader?
What? He's the leader.
He's not.
He's number one.
No, he's your fellow P in your pod, but he's not in my pod.
Well, our P pod is the leader then.
Oh, right. So today we're going to be talking about player power, and this has really been inspired by, if you like, or it came about because of all the kind of talk behind the scenes with a few Liverpool players, the holy trinity of Liverpool players, right? So you've got Trent.
Yes.
Yeah, Trent recently linked with Real Madrid. So that's been going on for some time, but it seems to be sort of getting close to boiling point now, where there seems to be more and more kind of talk about him moving over there. Still hasn't renewed his contract yet. There's the whole Van Dijk and Salah situation where for a long time, right the way up until this point in the season, their contracts were going to end, but only in the last couple of weeks they've been talking through, and it seems like those two have finally signed those contracts. But there's been lots of sort of murmurings about whether they're going to or whether they're not, and why it's been left to the final, the last season, the last year on their contract, and then they go for free.
Yeah,
so it's kind of like, are they manipulating their kind of influence, their power? Because then they could go to another club, like the whole idea of Kylian Mbappe. He let his PSG contract run down, and then he goes to Real Madrid. And because there's no fee that Real Madrid have to pay PSG, they pay the player a lot more in salaries. Yeah. So the players are trying to. It seems like there's this growing trend towards more and more players wanting to sort of run down their contracts so that they can get a bigger payday when they move to their next club. I mean, it's not a pleasant thing to be hearing and seeing, is it?
And like you see the Liverpool situation, like I don't think Salah or Van Dijk were ever going to leave, but what this culture of players running down their contracts has led to is more power to the players whilst in contract negotiations, because it becomes a real possibility and a real thought amongst clubs that they can leave. So it's handed that kind of like that sort of that bargaining tool to players that want to renew their contracts because of this more like growing possibility that they'll just run them out, whether they're going to or not. So obviously there's the ones that are just going to run them out. They'll take the payday, they'll take their the check to sign on to their other clubs rather than there being any transfer fees. But there's other players that use this culture to their advantage when negotiating contracts.
Yeah, true. It gives them more power, doesn't it? Like you say.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think, to be honest, I know it's all kind of sorted now, but I think Van Dijk and Salah have been really quite lucky in the sense that Liverpool's like performances and where Liverpool are this season, they've had a blinding season and they're winning the Premier League. And I think know what you mean, well, because it hasn't just been their performances. Like, their performances have been good, but they've been okay. Like, I'm not saying they don't deserve to win the league, but other teams have dropped off massively. And if those drop-offs didn't happen and Liverpool weren't winning the league, there'd be way more scrutiny on Salah and Van Dijk for how they've dealt with this whole thing.
Yeah,
100%. But they've kind of got away with it. It's kind of. I know what you mean. It's quite kind of one side.
It would have overshadowed it, wouldn't it? But fortunately, because they're doing well in the league, it's kind of like you say, it's kind of it's all right. We're top of the league anyway. It's all right, kind of thing. We'll let them off. So I know what you mean. They're kind of fortunate in that sense. So Salah's recently signed a new contract. So is it $350,000 a week or something? I read. I think. So they're keeping it for another 2 seasons. I think it is.
To be fair to him, that is probably what he's worth when you think that's what De Bruyne was on. I think Haaland's on more. He's probably
Haaland's
the best
on over
player
500,000 a week. I think 525 or something.
And he is probably the best player in the Premiership at the moment, isn't he?
This season, he's probably the best player this season. He's up there, definitely.
So I can't begrudge him that money, but I don't know.
It's just the way it's done, isn't it? I think it's just how football is too often shifting in a wrong direction in so many different metrics. The whole players not... I don't know if it's that sense. We're going to get into in the episode a kind of discussion around loyalty, aren't we? Kind of our players showing loyalty to their clubs, and should they? It's a bit of a debating point. Some people might say no, these are just employees of an organisation. But in other ways, football clubs aren't like normal businesses, although it's becoming more and more business-like. Football clubs are, it's more like a family kind of cultural thing.
Yeah, but that loyalty does work both ways, doesn't it? I think what's broken the loyalty down is PSR. I think it was started with, like, see what Chelsea are doing, just using their academy as like a bank. Do you know what I mean?
Well, what was it recently? A couple of weeks ago in the news, they sold their women's team to one of Todd Bowley's businesses or something or other to raise money for the Chelsea. Basically, sold the women's team to themselves, so it improves their financial, performance. So therefore, they can try and get through PSR. It's just ridiculous what they're able to do.
What I mean is the homegrown rule. Like, you look at Man United, for example, like there was talk over January about selling Garnacho and Mainu because they're academy graduates, so they're pure profit. When you sell
the whole
them
pure
for the
profit
books.
thing. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So the loyalty works both ways. If like look at what happened to Scott McTominay, for example. I really didn't want him to go in the summer, but we sold him because he was pure profit and he could have funded other deals for us.
Yeah, same with Arsenal. We've Emil Smith Rowe, for example, was a fan favourite, one of my favourite players, and selling him to Fulham, he left with all of us wishing him well. I saw comments online to Fulham and stuff saying, please look after him, and it's because he's pure profit. He wasn't getting regular minutes, but instead of keeping him by, it was like, we can make some money from it. And it kind of, from the PSR point of view, kind of clubs are kind of pushed into doing it in a sense, aren't they? Eddie Nketiah is another one of ours that we sold to Palace. Just to raise, it's pure profit, like you say, and it's kind of making clubs treat players. It's a good point you're mentioning, making clubs treat players like they're assets rather than people, in a sense. So exactly. I can understand what you mean, yeah.
And so that is 100% going to feed the player mentality into thinking, well, this is just a business then, this is just a contract. And so that idea of loyalty, if the business it's the business that writes your contract, if your employer feels like you're an asset in that way and it's going to show no loyalty to you, and these are players that have been in the academy from, like McTominay, from the age of 7 or something silly, there was no loyalty to him whatsoever when the profit was a possibility, then why on earth are players then going to treat the club with any loyalty?
Yeah, so true. Yeah, I get exactly what you mean. Well, how's that then?
It's a difficult thing. Difficult to know. Chicken egg situation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely more than one. It's not just one-sided. It's more than a one-sided argument, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Oh, and I'm hearing that Ces is about ready to join us as well. So let's get into it, shall we? In terms of player power, we want to sort of delve into all the different kind of how football is a real issue now with the power that players have, and that almost holding clubs to ransom. But we're going to look at the other things too. There's a few things that I haven't briefed you on, by the way. So coming up in this episode.
Wow, you haven't told your leader about the things that you want to bring up. That's very brave of you.
Yeah, exactly.
There's
all you know so far
that ego we were talking about in the past, Ces.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah,
I love it being back in the hosting seat. Oh, it's beautiful. But yeah, so it's come out in the news this week. So Real Madrid are in talks to sign Trent Alexander-Arnold when his contract expires in June. So Trent is now in his last few months of his contract, so it's perfectly legal to talk about your contracts.
Yeah.
With a player that isn't part of your club. So if you want to go and talk to a player and try and get them to come to your club, it's perfectly legal. A Liverpool fan that I know said apparently there's reports that this began back in 2023. Real Madrid said, don't accept any agreements and stuff like that. It's difficult to prove. You can't prove any of that. But Real Madrid seem to have done the same thing with Jude Bellingham. Again, there's rumours of that they just sort of say, if you do what we say, we'll sign you when your contract runs down. Yeah. And then what we're seeing an increased number of players doing is, if they do run their contracts down, it means they're more likely to get quite a hefty salary bump, because the club doesn't have to pay the club they're buying the player from. There's no fee because the contracts run out, right?
Yeah. So basically the players get a sign-on fee, don't they? So this is something that a lot of contracts have a 1-year extension trigger to stop this from happening. So the reason that they have their whatever, and then if they feel like it's coming towards the end, they'll do a 1-year extension, which is like not the option is with the club rather than with the player, to give the club a little bit more control over when the player leaves. So if they are in negotiations, they were going to leave, they can trigger the 1-year extension so that they don't do that. But obviously Trent's run his contract down, he doesn't have that 1-year extension, so he gets the big signing on bonus for signing on to another club.
But this is something that I think has been slowly getting worse since the money really came in, kind of like the Premier League era, because I think the reason it's happening is, one of the main reasons is because clubs actually have a lot less money now. 10 years ago, they were starting to spend 100 mil, 150 mil for a certain player, but they can't really afford to do that now. You remember, what was it, last year? The entire Italian league spent less than like Brighton or something.
Yeah.
So it was, there's so much less money now.
So much less.
Yeah, so much.
So much
money?
less money. I like it.
It is so much less, isn't it? Am I
That's right.
saying it wrong?
That's not incorrect.
That is right, isn't it?
Is it right?
So much less money.
Less.
There's less money.
That's true. All right, you can cut this out.
No, absolutely not. I'm keeping this
No,
in.
let's keep
Yeah.
it.
The teacher got it wrong. What can I say?
So much less. Something don't feel right about it.
Yeah, it's so much less. Yeah,
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Say it like that. That's what you should have said.
that's actually what I said. Anyway, so because there's so much less money, because of that, I think it's only right for the players to run the contracts down so they're not kind of held to ransom. Because otherwise, if they've got 3 years left on their contract, the club are within their rights to say, no, we're going to wait for 100 million to come in, knowing that no one will pay 100 million.
Yeah.
So I think it's only right. I mean, you remember Bakary Sagna?
Bakary Sagna.
Bakary
Yeah,
Sagna.
yeah.
Yeah, he did that. He ran his contract down. And I think it's fair because then it means the player gets basically to choose his own destiny.
Well, that's actually, I had it down as a kind of subtopic I wanted to ask you guys about, so I might as well bring it up now then. So does sort of loyalty exist in football anymore? Do players really, when you sort of see like the old Steven Gerrard at Liverpool in the past and, these players that come through, Saka at Arsenal right now, is there actual loyalty?
I will say one thing about Trent actually when it comes to loyalty, because there definitely isn't the kind of loyalty as before. However, the Liverpool fans that are slating Trent and saying he's not loyal and stuff, what are they talking about? He's been there since he was a little kid, and he's 27 or something now.
He's won everything with them.
He's won everything with them.
He's given a lot,
some of the best years. Yeah, they should be sending him off with a thank you wave. Not this kind of idea that he's being disloyal to them.
Yeah,
he's not been disloyal at all.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different takes on this, and there was an episode on Gary Neville's podcast where him and Cara were going at each other, completely opposite ends of this debate.
Yeah,
and Cara's defending the Liverpool situation, and Neville can't believe that clubs let it get to this stage.
Yeah,
but wherever you stand on it, I think there are some Liverpool fans are genuinely just a bit annoyed that he's going for free. That seems to be one of the big things that I've read about, that it's just, he's won everything, we wish him well kind of thing, but he's going on a free, so we're just not gaining anything.
Yeah, but
in that sense. So from a club point of view, I can understand that frustration.
But then equally, from a club
think it's
perspective, though, like Liverpool could have been asking crazy money or something, which has left him no choice. You don't know where the dialogue has gone and how it's got to that point. I'm sure that if Trent could have got some kind of fee to go towards the club to help or whatever, I'm sure he would have done that. I don't think there's anything in it. I don't think he's going off and leaving Liverpool because he's given them the big two fingers or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I think it's just like...
Yeah, they could have quite easily said, you know what, to help us out, we will let you go, but to help us out, sign a 3-year contract with a release clause of 60 mil.
Exactly.
So we'll get at least 60 mil. Yeah, but they wouldn't have done that. They would have gone, we're not going to sell you for any less than 150 mil, something ridiculous. Exactly. Something that'll make Trent go, no, I'm not going to sign anything. I'm going to have the power to go when I want. I think that's perfectly fair.
Yeah.
I don't like this idea that Liverpool fans think, oh, we're getting nothing from them. He's given everything to them.
Yeah, that's true.
They wouldn't have got the kind of success without him.
Yeah.
I think the bit which I'm quite uneasy with, if it's true, and that's the thing, it's only if it's true. If Real Madrid have been part of this, if they said, just don't accept any contracts and you can come to the great Real Madrid, you can join us if you behave in this way. So if Real Madrid have influenced that, and that's tapping up. That is against the law in the football rules anyway. You're not allowed to tap up. So, but they have been it's been suggested that Real Madrid have done that. So if that's true, and it is a big if, but if they have done that, then they've manipulated the situation and to make it so Liverpool lose out essentially.
Yeah,
so that's where it's a bit distasteful, which I'm not.
I know they've done it a lot like earlier in time, but every club does that now. Like, do you remember it used to be that you were not that players were not allowed to speak about terms or contracts before the teams had agreed a fee. So you'd had to bid on the player first. They agreed between the two clubs, and then talks with the player happened.
Then talks would begin.
And now,
and you have to go through. It was typical that you had to ask permission to talk to the player.
Whereas now,
of that club.
Whereas now, terms are already agreed. You get announcements from other very popular journalists, very reputable ones on social media and stuff, and they'll tell you that terms are already agreed before clubs have even spoken to each other and agreed a fee. So that's happening. I know it's not happening in quite the same time frame as sort of like years ahead, but where is the line? Because it's happening anyway. So what are the rules there?
That's true.
That whole area has become really grey and murky. Like, it used to be very clear. The teams had to agree fees first, and then you could speak to the player. But now that's just gone out the window. So the player's free to speak to a club regardless of if anything has been agreed. And that's the case across the board. That's like standard practice now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what I would prefer to see is the clubs getting more power again. Kind of like, you know how when we brought Dan onto our show, we've kind of got control over him now. So
we gave him the chance. So therefore we've kind of supported him. So I think he owes us back.
Yeah, the loyalty is definitely there, and we won't lose that loyalty. You know, whether we get rid of him or not.
But what if he starts wanting to?
I feel like I'm being trafficked.
What if he starts kind of just, working his contract down to the point where he's got the right to go and talk to another podcast?
Well, the thing is, I think Dan knows that he's very replaceable. So I think he'll want to, renew the contract.
So the value's with us, really. We're the ones with the cards.
Yeah, we can give him any contract. I'm sure he'll sign it.
Oh. My desirability is low.
Another area, though, guys. So do you remember the whole Ronaldo modern slavery comment that he came out with? So do you remember this, Dan? So I think it was in his first stint, wasn't it? I've got it here. So
no, it was in the second stint.
I've got an article here from 2008. I'm a slave, says Ronaldo, as he pushes for Madrid move. So this must have been when he was originally...
He's a very well-paid slave, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, exactly. And it was controversial at the time, wasn't it? I don't know if you...
Do you know what? I think the biggest problem is social media because, you see... we've spoken a lot, I know, about Rashford, and we all know how much I really love him.
Oh, yeah.
He's great.
That's definitely been clear to us, hasn't it?
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely.
But he was a huge PR machine, and his social medias and everything, he has a massive following, and that in itself becomes a huge value. And I believe the clubs see that in itself as a monetary asset as well. So I think that's part of the reason why we tolerated him for so long, was because of the brand that is Marcus Rashford as an individual. So it's like almost where social media is, and the individual players become almost sort of followed more than the club does. Particularly at United, I don't know if it's the same in your fan bases with Everton and Arsenal, but I see a lot of United fans that are really more like player FC. Like they'll back a player rather than their team.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that there's no Everton player that's bigger than the club right now.
I don't know. Dwight McNeil, wow.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. Pickford's the closest. That's a low bar.
I was about to say Pickford. I was about to say.
I suppose it's the big I ams, isn't it? With Arsenal, we've had a few of them over the years. These big players who wanted... Alexis Sanchez, he was great for us, but he became... He used us how he wanted to. Went to United, obviously things didn't go well in the end, but he could have easily renewed and showed more, say, loyalty, if you like.
Yeah.
But went to United, and it was kind of... I suppose I'm trying to think of it from a flip side. For our point of view, in our careers, right, the business or organisation we work for, we'd feel victims if we were in that position, right? It's just playing devil's advocate here. If we're in a position where our employer wouldn't let us leave.
No, I don't think so. Because in none of our jobs do we sign a certain contract to say we'll be there for a certain length of time.
Yeah, that's fair.
Whereas in football, they agree to do that. So if they agree to stay there for a certain length of time, and then they cry that they're not allowed to break that contract, I think that's wrong.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Well, I suppose it's like a notice period, isn't it? Like if you sign a contract to say that your notice period will be, 3 months, you then can't cry about the fact that you can't leave for 3 months.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
I like the idea about when you mentioned social media, Dan, because it's definitely something that it makes fans connect with the players more than the clubs. Then, so they start getting the followers and the kind of power to be able to connect with the fans.
The influence,
that way.
Isn't it?
The influence, and also,
and then it grows the ego, doesn't it?
It does.
It grows their ego, and they believe that they are then an individual rather than just a team member.
And not just that, I think also it coincides with agents.
It's very true. I think agents have a big part to play in this.
Yeah, I think the agents only really get paid when a player moves anyway. So obviously an agent is going to tell the player, you should move. I can get you a bigger deal.
And sometimes the agents put stuff out, don't they? They put stuff in the media like, that he's not very happy at the club, or that, you've had examples where agents have been quite vocal to try and unsettle and try and drive up the price or to attract attention.
And even to
or
for
to
new
get
contracts.
Sometimes it's
very true.
Yeah, exactly, for a new contract, exactly. So, I mean, the one of the funniest examples I can think of is Jesse Lingard. So, in terms of that ego thing, Jesse Lingard was very much I would say, an average player for United. He had some time there in a very sort of weak period between, I would say, Van Gaal and Mourinho. They were kind of the two managers that really played him.
Was he an academy product of United?
He was an academy product, yeah.
Right.
He was an academy product. He was in the same team as... was
he with Rashford?
Paul Pogba.
He was
no, Rashford
fair
was
few
later.
years older.
Paul
He started
Pogba
quite late.
and Morrison.
Okay.
Yeah, he was in his sort of mid to late 20s when he actually sort of got into the first team.
Yeah.
But when he eventually ran his contract down, he went on social media and made a comment or something, making out how upset he was that he didn't get a testimonial.
Wow.
Blimey.
Yeah, and that just goes to show what social media can do to the ego. Like, this is a player that had maybe 4 or 5 years of, let's face it, average footballing. He wasn't incredible. He's never gonna
he had patches, didn't he?
Widely remembered. But he wasn't happy he didn't get a testimonial. Now, to expect a testimonial, that's another level of ego, isn't it?
But that's all the culmination, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got all the money that came in, and to boost the players' ego, the agents whispering in their ear, the social media that makes them
100%.
think that they're larger than life.
And also, you have to have to get to the top level to be a performer in the Premier League, right? And especially at clubs like United, for example, you need to have that personal confidence, the drive to be able to succeed and to, so it's all part of the whole context, isn't it? With all those things you just said as well.
It, doesn't it, though?
It all feeds it and bigs it even more. And it's to try and stay humble. I know it's almost a meme these days when you say stay humble. Obviously, there was the Haaland situation earlier against Arsenal.
Yeah.
But the situation where players have to try and control those egos, I think it comes down to decency. It's just like how you should treat. So Ronaldo at United, they kind of made it. I know they got him from, was it Sporting?
Yeah.
But it was United that put him on a platform and helped develop him into the player that he eventually became. And then he's kind of going behind United's back, going into the media side of things in the interviews, and it's not a decent thing to do. And I'm not just saying he's the only one. Loads of players do that these days.
Yeah.
What has Mbappe done? You mentioned before we started recording, Ces, about Mbappe.
Yeah, because he's he's probably the biggest name to have run his contract down, really, hasn't it?
Yeah.
The problem is he had to do that. He had to do that in order to move, because no one will pay the actual fee that he would have cost. He would have been 200 mil plus, and no one has that kind of money anymore. So, of course, he would run the contract down. Some people say it's because he would have been given the money. I think he was given 100 mil or something from Real Madrid because they didn't have to pay a transfer fee to PSG. But, I mean, that's not the whole case, is it? It's because clubs can't afford to pay that kind of thing, the actual value to PSG. So I think it's fair, to be honest.
But also, though, at the same time, Real Madrid, since, I know you talk about player power, but there have always been big clubs that have just had that appeal since forever in football. Like Real Madrid back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, back in that era of football before all this player power stuff, if Real Madrid wanted you, you would want to go there, and it wasn't because of any disloyalty to your club. It was because Real Madrid were asking for you. And
I've asked that to Dan.
For example,
I've asked that to James before. I said to James, I said to you, didn't I, if you were playing for Arsenal and then Real Madrid came for you, you would be tempted.
I think you'd definitely be tempted. And it always depends on the context. Are you playing regular minutes for Arsenal? But I mean, if we're playing for our boyhood club, we love them, and if it's a situation where you're a key member of the team and you love every week you play there, like if in my sense, obviously I'm a fan. A lot of these players have been signed from other places.
But these people are professionals. These people are professionals. They're not fans.
Exactly
I think it's unfair to expect every member of your team to be a fan of the club. Like Ronaldo wasn't a Man United fan, like he was an incredible footballer and he wanted to go to Man United because at the time we were winning a lot of things. We were a massive club and he thought that's where he wanted to go because he wanted to be the best. But I can imagine as a kid growing up in Portugal, Real Madrid was always the dream. And as a Man United fan, I never begrudged him for going to Real Madrid, and I never thought it was him being disloyal or player power or anything like that. I just thought his time at our club came to a point. He'd done what he wanted. He'd won the European Cup. He'd done incredible things for us. He was our best player in one of the best teams I've ever seen play. And then he wanted to go to Real Madrid, and that was that. I didn't. You know what I mean? I didn't. There wasn't any malice there from the fan base, from what I understand.
Yeah.
From what I've seen. You know, I think there was just an acknowledgement like he wanted to go. I think player power now is far more of an issue than it was then because of social media. I think the social media thing has made it a big thing where players are far more treated as individuals than a member of a team. I think that's the case.
The team's not as important as the player, is it?
Yeah, you know what I've noticed as well?
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely in our lifetime, it's happened a number of times and more frequently, but I have no idea what it was like before. When players refuse to train.
Oh, yeah.
It's happened a lot, hasn't it?
Didn't that happen at Everton,
Was
actually?
it Harry
It's happened a
Kane
number of
did
times.
that?
So
Harry Kane did that, didn't he?
Anthony Gordon, Joleon Lescott.
How is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's understandable if you want to leave Everton.
They just
That's fair enough.
No, but still, for me, it's the problem is, and maybe it's just the way I've been brought up, but there's a way to go about things.
Yeah.
There's showing respect. It's not that you should be forced to be, as Ronaldo put it, a slave. He called it modern slavery, which is ridiculously insensitive.
With his measly 200 grand a week.
Yeah, even the money back then, he would have been on a ridiculous amount. And he's winning everything with United, or at least challenging for everything. You know, to say something like that and to go behind United's backs, I think that's just the way to do it. Trent should be allowed to leave Liverpool, but in a way that's respectful at the same time, you know. And I'm not saying he hasn't been, by the way. I'm just saying that all players should be respectful to their contracts, respectful to the club, and then the clubs need to be mutually around that. They need to respect the players. They need to, once a contract is an agreement between both parties, right? So the idea that the club has to respect the player, but the player should respect the club, and there shouldn't be breaching of that contract in between. So really it just comes down to the kind of the way you perform. They are meant to be professional, so why don't you start acting like a professional?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got one other area where player power is clearly evident. And it needs to be brought up, and that is on the pitch, speaking with refs, all of that kind of thing. I'm looking at Ces trying to provoke something because I know how Ces
is this the surrounding the referees
surrounding the refs, and the players have the influence and the power on the pitch, or so they believe anyway. That's clearly evident by the way they approach the refs.
This Dan, just like to say, this is James stealing my stuff now.
Well, I'm looking at you because I want you to take this one, really, because I think this is another example of player power getting out of hand.
Yeah.
The players believe that they're the most important things. They need, and this is part of the problem of football, in football at the moment. The referee should be the...
Okay, here we go.
He's getting ready. The referee should be the ones with the power in the game.
You watched a rugby game recently.
I did, yeah.
And you saw the respect that these 6'5" behemoths gave to these tiny little referees who look up to them and point up to their faces and say, "Hey, none of that," you know. And
they just
these giants are like, sorry, sir.
Sorry.
Yeah. Now they're taught that right from the beginning when they're kids. They're taught that show respect to the referee.
Again, it's respect.
It's all about respect. If they're taught that as a kid and into adulthood, going all the way through training and then into the professional leagues, if they actually are taught respect, and they respect the referee, they respect the rules, they respect authority, then they're not going to have these huge egos like in football when even when we say, you know, the early 2000s is the best time that we remember in football, even then they were surrounding the referee, they were pushing the refs, swearing right up to their face.
This has been multi-generations, isn't it?
And then I've said before, if the players do that and are allowed to do that, the managers do it, and all of the other players on the sidelines do it, all the fans do it, everyone at home does it. There's no respect at all. So if there's no respect at all, then why are we surprised that the players show no respect to the club?
Yeah, well, that's it. So really what we're finding is this is all coming down, the theme of respect is kind of intertwined with all of this.
It
really.
is, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we've talked about fixing referees and standards and all that stuff in the past, and it clearly overlaps with some of that as well. Well, there we are then. So clearly player power is something that we need to fix. So let's get into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Right, there was something you were saying there, Ces, a bit earlier, with the whole contract situation. I took a note. Okay. So, because you were talking about the kind of fees and the crazy money and the salaries and stuff like that.
Stuff that we're paying Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just talking about Dan himself, the salaries that he's on.
Insane salary, isn't it?
And it just bigs that ego up, doesn't it? It's naturally going to fuel it. So I think part of it, I
can't believe the release clause that I agreed to.
Yeah, well, I mean, for us to have agreed this insane salary for him when we're a non-profit organisation, I think we did something wrong there. We need to rethink this.
Yeah, and to be fair, I'm probably the reason you're non-profit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, what you were saying, Cess, I think you've really mentioned a good point there. And I know I've mentioned a fix for this in the past about capping salaries and I think there should be a cap on transfer fees, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you could group categories of players, if you like. So you could say, elite players, a bit like, in the American sports, they have you're allowed to randomly sign certain players and stuff like that. I just want to put a bit more kind of regulation involved when you can buy players, right? So you can still buy any player, but here's my fix for the whole salary thing, which will help to control the egos of the players.
Okay.
And that is that there is a maximum fee clubs are allowed to pay for a player. All right. So it kind of takes a bit away from that kind of I'm going to wait until such and such, my contract's going to run down or whatever it is. So what I've said in previous episodes when we were talking about players' prices and salaries and stuff like that is I talked about a salary cap, and I think this is another example of why that's needed, because that will make it's less of an incentive for players to drive down their contracts and then just wait to get like Mbappe's had going to Real Madrid. He's going to be, I mean, what's he on every week?
Yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily because of the signing on fee that they're leaving. Even if he didn't get any of that 100-something million that he was offered, he would have wanted to go anyway. I think Trent, if they told him there's not going to be a signing on fee, which is going to give you I don't know how many hundreds of thousands a week, he'd probably still go, I'd rather go to Real Madrid than stay at Liverpool.
All I'm saying is that I think there's just less of an incentive to drive your contract down. So players could still go to Real Madrid, but it's not going to be for, I'm going to wait until my contract goes down to zero, so my club, Liverpool or Man United or whatever, loses out. They don't gain anything. And I can just get paid loads when I go to Real Madrid as well as an extra thing. So if you cap the salary, so we need to cap salaries for several reasons, as we talked about on a previous episode anyway.
Yeah.
The inflation in football is crazy. How Sterling's on 250 guys. Anyway, so so capping that I think will help reduce that incentive for players to drive their contracts down. So that it's kind of like a backwards way of working it, but I think that would help for players to actually, I'm allowed to negotiate with other clubs, but I'm not going to go for free. I'm not going to go for zero necessarily.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. For me, a fix is, I think the footballing world needs to get used to not making money by selling players. I think that's something they need to do. I think they need to get used to the idea that players could go on a free, potentially.
Yeah,
because then
I think it's going to be more standard practice.
It's going to be more standard, and
the
more we have this idea that, oh my God, there's this player power, they're going to run the contract down, we're kind of at their whim. The more we just accept that, the less power they'll end up having. So they'll go, we know we're not going to get any money from you after signing you on for 5 years, so we're not going to expect that. Fine, you can go if you want, and so they can start planning earlier then. Okay, if you're not going to renew a contract with 2 years left in the contract, we'll already start finding a replacement. You can sit on the bench if you want. And all of a sudden, the mentality is less to do with kind of being at the whim of the players. It's more future planning. So you'll always have this train of players coming in and replacing them. And in the end, the players can then all of a sudden they go, all right, fine, I will sign a new contract then so I can keep on playing for you guys.
It will also, in turn, it will also probably naturally bring down the salaries offered by the clubs. If a club is like, they're not going to want to commit to a 5-year deal on 250 grand a week if they feel like that player is just going to end up leaving at the end of the contract. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the commitment from the club, once they accept that, the commitment from the club will be less as well at the same time.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes into James's fix as well, doesn't it? So
I think that I like what sort of direction both of you are going down. There's a few things from a business point of view I just want to mention which might go in on top of it. I don't know what you guys think. So if their contract, say they sign a 4 or 5 year contract, something like that, I think to help your ideas work, it has to be as you reach the year before, so at the cut-off, so you've got 1 year left, the player has to sign.
When you say your ideas, James, I haven't had my idea yet. I just reiterated your idea, just to be clear.
Oh, thank you very much. I liked it. So the idea...
I haven't... Yeah.
So I think a year before the contract runs out, the player has to tell, like you talked about the notice period earlier, Dan, there has to be a notice period for the clubs. So then the clubs can plan to replace that player. So that notice period should be a season, because in football, obviously, it's very difficult. You have certain windows and things like that, so you need to plan for it, especially with the price of players and things, which, like I say, need to be controlled. I'm putting 100 million maximum, because that's still ridiculous. 100 million price tag is maximum that you can go to. That would be if I was a regulator in football. Yeah. Hopefully they can bring that in. But so there should be a notice period of a year, so at least 1 season, so the clubs can start planning. If the player hasn't signed by then, right, we're going to plan for going without you then. Yeah. The only issue which that then creates as well, though, which I had another fix for, is that means the club's got less bargaining power when they come to the negotiation table to sell that player if he's going to go or not.
And they've got the potential that if they do sign a new contract, you've got 2 players then that are in the same position potentially.
So I like the idea of having that notice period, because I think that works with your fix, Cess. Yeah. But I think and then there's FFP, another issue there as well when it comes to, because clubs have to balance their books. So if you're letting players go for nothing, so unless we have a set price that players go as a minimum to clubs, so clubs can at least earn 5 million, 10 million, whatever it is. I don't know, by the league, maybe, that sort of thing. I don't know whether we can categorise players in that sort of sense. But there's a myriad of problems here that we need to make sure. Yeah. But I think the key principles are players don't run down the contracts and leave the club with nothing to plan. They've got no player and they've left the player for nothing. The player's gone for nothing. Yeah. That we need to avoid that. So I think the fix there works in that sense.
Yeah.
I think... I alluded to sort of like my fix a little bit earlier on. So what you're saying about the control and stuff, like I think we should go back to how it was before, where the teams had to agree between themselves. So the team that owns the player has to agree terms with a club before the club can speak to the player. I feel like that really needs to come back. And then the team then has control over that transfer. They can have control over as and when a player leaves, rather than a player being able to discuss terms with any club they like. I mean, even now, like, what is it? If you're in the last 6 months of your contract, you're allowed to officially sign for another club.
Or at least talk and have negotiations with. Yeah,
and I just feel like that. I think if you're in contract with someone else, I think to be able to speak to another like team or whatever, I think there has to be agreements made between the clubs first before the club approaches the player. That way, the club is then in control of where that player goes, and I think that's where it should be. I think it should go back to that.
Yeah, I just feel like we know that money has got out of control
in football. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And the reason why you want to make money by selling players is because you want to use the money to buy players. But if we just let players run down their contracts and they go for free, no one's buying players. So you won't have this idea that you need to make money to use the money. All of that money will be gone then. Yeah. And so we will no longer have this idea of having to spend 200 million every season to get players in. You won't have to spend that money. Players go on a free, you can get them for free. And also it'll mean that when you sign a contract, you will actually work to that contract. There's been too many times when someone signs a 5-year contract and they leave after 2 years. What was the point in the contract then?
Yeah, and that's in the real world in business. If you subcontract someone in, you get someone to come and do a job for you, or you outsource your accounting or something like that. You're expecting them to do that job until the contract's been completed. Yeah. If you're on a building site and you hire someone to come and do the plumbing or something like that, they're there to do that job, and then once they're done, they finish. Everyone knows where they stand. They get paid the right amount for it that was agreed. In football, it seems to be this weird mix of there's a bit of business and then there's a bit of sport, and it's all kind of like somewhere in the ether that the dots don't always join together. And I think it should be, if it's going to be a business, then you need to have contracts like the business world. If it's going to be a sport, which is where I prefer it to be, it could even be like the fantasy football, where you're allowed so many credits. We get 100 million to spend in fantasy football. Every player is given a value. And by the way, in the business world, accountants, there are trained professionals that associate a value to an asset. Yeah. They can do that with players based on maybe an age, performance, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I mean, you say this player is worth 5 credits, this player is worth 10. You're given 100 or something. Like that. Every window you're allowed to spend a certain amount. Whatever it is, we need control because players are just running riot and they're manipulating the business. One other thing, agents are not allowed. There needs to be a regulator on how much agents are allowed to get and how much percentage-wise, because they are the fees. My
idea again, but whatever.
It is all right. I'll give you credit for that. But agents are milking the system.
They really are
taking so much money, and they're part of the reason why prices in football are just skyrocketing, and that's impacting on us as well.
They're one of the biggest reasons. It's just unbelievable how much power they have, how much money they make out of this. Any player that gets sold, such a big percentage is given to them that we saw a stat not long ago, didn't we, about how much money agents make each year. And it's mental. Yeah, so I think that needs to go. Agents needs to go. I just like the idea that we take away the whole transfer fees thing. It'll be nice if all the players, they sign a certain contract, work to that contract, they go for free, so other teams don't have to buy them for a certain money. Everyone just goes for free. If you want to offer a 10-year contract, do a 10-year contract. That'll be brilliant, and then they can work to the 10 years. But that player, you will be stuck there for 10 years, so you need to make sure you want to stay there for 10 years.
And I suppose there can be a point where both parties agree. So like your own, if you both agree that, okay, we're going to let you have this notice period and that kind of thing. I think the notice period would be something really helpful because it protects both parties. It lets the player plan for where they're going next, and it lets the club prepare for what they're going to do next.
Yeah. Obviously, we won't give Dan a notice period. We'll just terminate his contract whenever we want.
But he's still on probation anyway. We haven't got to worry about that.
That's a good point, yeah. He's still on probation for the next 5 years, isn't he? Yeah.
So far, but then we might extend that.
On a 0 hour contract.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed a sick day or anything.
Right, well, I think it's time for us to hand the power over to our guru, John. Here's John's Juicy Tips. Juicy.
Your tips give me power, John.
John's Juicy Tips.
Alright, this week comes with a warning. You have to look at your FPL teams because it's blank game week. All your Arsenal, Palace, City and Villa players won't be playing. So let's look at who to choose from the rest of the teams. In defence, it's the magnificent Milos Kerkez for Bournemouth. He has a lovely home fixture against a shot-shy, lowly Manchester United team, and already has 8 attacking returns to his name this season. In midfield, it's happy Harvey Barnes for Newcastle. He's happy because he has 4 goals and 4 assists in his last 6 games, and after Salah, he has the highest number of goal contributions per 90 in the Premier League. He also has Ipswich next, so it's time for Harvey to fill his boots. And up front, it's the super sweet Norwegian nectarine, it's Jorgen Strand Larsen for Wolves. He has 5 goals in his last 5 games, and comes up against a dire Leicester City team. He even could be a captaincy shout. Juicy.
Thanks for that, John. As always, our guru with, I would say all the power, but he's still in second place. He's catching up a little. Well, at point of recording, he's catching up with Sam, but only by a few points. Sam's built up enough of a lead, though, in first place. So, we've got how many people? 45 people in our league, and they're flying ahead, those two. But can John find enough power to catch up with Sam?
Has John got more power in his reserves to call upon?
Enough power in his reserves. I got to say, Dan, I reckon by the end of this week, so obviously a double game week, isn't it, that we're in currently? And I reckon after that, you're going to be eating my dust. I reckon I'm going to leapfrog you.
You have taken me over as of recording today.
Have I? Oh, yeah, I have. Oh, yeah. Come on.
Which means my positive thinking of last week is, destroyed.
We really have to think about the forfeits that you're going to have to do. Because it was
it's
you
funny
and Cess ganged up
you're
saying, I'm going to wear a Rooney top because how much I hate Rooney or whatever it is.
Yeah, but Yeah, but it's funny because your forfeit to me, we were discussing this before. Your suggestion, you didn't like your suggestion because you don't like the idea of me wearing an Arsenal top.
Yeah, I've got like a Bergkamp 10 top that I could. You could wear that. A Man United, fan wearing it, but I didn't really want you touching the holy shirts. Yeah.
No. No, you don't want a Man United fan soiling your Arsenal tops, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Especially a Bergkamp one. Yeah, I don't want you.
So you're gonna have to come up. You're gonna have to come up with a whole new forfeit for me.
It's like Thor's hammer. You're not worthy. You're not worthy to wear the shirt.
Oh, I see how it is. Well,
you'll wear it and you'll just fall flat to the floor. You just don't have the strength, the power to wield the great shirt.
I think the same would probably apply to you in a Rooney shirt. So,
well. Let us know what you think our forfeit should be, guys. You can contact us on any of the socials. If you'd like to be a last-minute entry into our league, all your points to carry across. You can see if you can pip John or Sam up into the top places. See where you finish against us. So the code is 8B8E1L. And you'll join the Football is Fixable Alright podcast league. Wow, it's exciting as we enter the final few games of the season. All that remains for me to say is have a good week, and it's goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from me. Bye 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 bye.